Hey there, good evening everybody. I want to welcome you here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. Just going to move up a little closer just to make sure the mic is working. So, we're here to do What's New. This is an episode I do every Saturday night in which I talk about an album that's new to 2024, brand new album out this year. So, the album I've chosen to do tonight is by the Imagining Kings, and their album is called Dreams from the Empty House. This was released on August the 29th, 2024. It's about 48 minutes in length and is on an independent label. Appearing on here, of course, is the two main guys, the guys who are the Imaginary Kings, Nick Durando on drums and Peter Rana on keyboards and guitars. But we also have a host of other musicians appearing on parts throughout the album, including John Bryan on bass for tracks 1, 3, 4, and 6, Mo Howard on mellotron for the first track, Francois Vingrieve on lead guitar for tracks 1 and 6, Phil Pansard on bass for track 2, Piers Giroux, I think it's his Pier Giroio Lucidi on guitars for track number 3. Chris Branch on bass for tracks 5, 8, and 11. Tony Wisniewski on bass for track 7. Steve Johnson on bass for track 9. Timothy Reed on lead guitar for track 9. Joey Six on lead guitar for track 10, and Kelly Miller on guitars and FX for track 11. So there's quite a host of people on here, but the two main guys, of course, are doing all of the music. They're putting it all together and just filling in who they want on what tracks, pretty much. So there are, I believe, 12 tracks. Let me just check here. Yeah, 12 tracks in total. So the overall feel of the album is pretty solid. It's melodic. It's driven by synthesizer and percussion throughout all of the tracks, pretty much. There is no vocals on the track at all, so it's entirely an instrumental. I would call this a melodic. It's very similar. Like each song is fairly similar. It's kind of like what Hawkwind and Eloy do. They've got different tracks, but each of them has a common element. There's a common feel throughout the album from this whole group. Most of the stuff is pretty decent, I think. You've got a lot of synthesizer parts as well, but it's not dominated by synthesizer. There are quite a bit of different keyboard sounds, some mellotron, some organ, some keyboards, some piano at times as well. You've got some kind of Winwood sounding instruments, but I think they're probably synthesizer driven for the most part. So, and bass, like lots of different bass players on here playing lots of different bass. The bass is fairly dominant as well. So overall, I think it's a pretty decent album. Progressive, of course, in nature, but also spacey at times. A little bit of symphonic sounding, quite a bit actually of symphonic sounding album. So I'm not going to go through every track on the album because they're all pretty much the same. What I'm going to do is I'll talk a little bit about each, but the tracks that I like the best I'll talk a little bit more about. So we got Dreams from the Empty House, the opening track. Very symphonic keyboards, lots of symphonic keyboard sounds, clear, distinguishable. The basses and percussion are pretty dominant. It's kind of a catchy melody. This is another common theme from the album, throughout the album, catchy melodies. It's a little bit slow, a little bit pastoral. There's a lot of that. It's kind of a melodic, slow, pastoral, but symphonic album at the same time. And there's a bit of a guitar riff in the key part towards the end of the song as well. The next song was Deus Ex Machina. I think that's how you mean it. Deus Ex Machina. Yeah, a little bit more keyboard and synthesizer dominated here. Got some heavy bass and percussion parts throughout the song. Kind of a catchy melody. Lots of rhythm here. Lots of intricate sounds throughout the album. So now we're going to move on to the other tracks. So again, the next song, Walls, pretty much the same thing going on here. It's got a bit of a catchy riff, not too bad. Memento, the next track out, a little bit slower, but again, melodic, mellotronic type of keyboard sounds here. Some heavy drums, some background percussion, and the bass is prominent as well. It's a bit of a catchy track. The next track out is the first of 4 in a row that I probably like the best on the album. Another Sunday in Heaven. This is a synthesizer orchestrational type opening. Very mellow song. The organ and keyboards throughout the whole track. Some strong piano on this though. A little bit of this, maybe I think the first track with some piano on it. And some catchy guitar parts and catchy riff. Probably this one or the next one, Doorways, are probably my 2 favorite tracks on the album. Doorways, keyboard synthesizer opening. Again, some heavy melodic drum parts, keyboards, and almost Christmassy sound to it at times throughout the song. And it's, again, synthesizer dominated here. Through a Lens, keyboard parts and woodwind. There's a little bit of a woodwind sound to it, but I'm pretty sure it's a synthesizer woodwind sound. It's got that kind of metallic feel to it. Melodic sounding drums, builds as the song goes along, and then you have this kind of brief interlude followed by an acoustic guitar bit and then an electric guitar solo, which is probably one of the first ones on the album. No Subject is the last of those 4 big kind of songs that I like the best. You got your frontal keyboard part here with some percussion dominating these 2. It builds, and as the guitar kind of takes over and the drums become more frontal here, and it switches to a kind of acoustic guitar with a bass and then a solo towards the end. They tend to like to leave their solos kind of towards the end of the songs. Honey in the Shadows, another guitar picking opening with some drums, another guitar part filling in. Bass is strong here and forward. The melodic, fairly heavy track. The next track is Jackson's Road. Yeah, pretty much the same. Not too much difference here. This or the next song, Dancing on the Edge. At the Edge, kind of got the same kind of thing going on here. A little bit more drums in this particular track. And then we get to the final 2 tracks, Falling. This one has a bit of a piano opening with some percussion in there. It's slow, melodic guitar. Slow, melodic track overall. It almost has a kind of a slide guitar feel to it, but it's clearly not a slide guitar, I don't think. And then you have the final track, which is After All. Melodic. This is a bit of a darker song than the rest of the tracks. It's noticeable in that. That's why I made a point of it. The piano part is good. The acoustic guitar part is good as well. A decent track. So overall, I find this to be a good album. I wouldn't say it's a great album. It's very melodic. There's not much difference between any of the tracks. Little bits of darkness at the end, a little bit of maybe some piano in there, a little bit of guitar soloings here and there throughout the album, but there's nothing really separating them to make them like, oh, this song really sounds like that, or this song really sounds like this. None of that. It's very Hawkwinish that way. It doesn't sound like Hawkwind at all, but it's very melodic in its sound and consistent in its sound throughout the entire album. If it doesn't really remind me of anybody in particular, maybe the first thought was a little bit like Ladytron, but not nearly as electronic sounding as that. But it's probably in that same kind of range. So I think it's not a bad album. I think for the right price I might get it. Maybe in a couple of years if I see it and it's not too expensive I might grab it. But it's not an album that's going to be on my list of new albums to get right away. But still not a bad album. So I hope you've liked this episode of What's New. If you have, please hit the like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. Any comments about the group Imaginary Kings? They have several albums, I believe. And if you want to make any comments about their music, you can do that in the comment section below. Any suggestions that you may want to talk about, you can do that as well. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of What's New. We will be back next Saturday with another one. It's only a few weeks away on my favorites, where I'll be doing I think we're going to do 25, my 25 favorite albums of the year for this year. I'm looking forward to this. This is a pretty strong crop this year. I don't know if it's as strong as last year, but it's pretty strong this year as well. Anyways, we will see you then. Take care and have yourself a good evening. Goodbye.